Hello, everybody. Here's game number two, and we are looking at games from Mikhail Botvinnik from the white side in his prime years. The name of this playlist is Botvinnik in his prime, and we're looking at game number two from that. Um, we're looking at the Soviet Championship in Leningrad in 1939. It's round 11. Botvinnik versus Ilya Khan, whose namesake you may know from the famous Carol Khan variation. So he is one half of that duo. Botvinnik here had the white pieces, and this time he opened up with d4 as opposed to his first game where he started with e4. So knight f6, c4, e6, and we get a Nimzo Indian defense. Knight f3 from Botvinnik, and now c5. And we get into the sidelines, and now the game transposes quickly into like a Zamish variation after this a3. Bishop takes c3, check, b takes c3, and now queen a5. All right, trying to pressure uh, the white queen side. Botvinnik just simply plays a solid bishop d2, discouraging the exchange in the center on d4, knight e4, and now just simply queen c2. And Botvinnik is all about the center. Bishop goes, and he doesn't take with the queen here, although it's playable. He just simply takes with the knight here. And now d6, and very solid e3. Notice again the white control over the central squares in his territory. E4 here would be desirable but premature after c takes d4, c takes d4, and then say knight c6. It's kind of problematic um, protecting this pawn. White can protect it, but in the midst of that, black will have an easy game here. So, for example, let's say d5, for example, and moves like knight d4, exploiting the rook being unprotected here. Sorry, not I said knight d4 and played b4. I meant knight d4. Sorry. And then on queen b2, then e5. This move will be a mistake. If b4, then just simply queen c3, and then it's all over for black. This is just an example of why this move e4 is just a little premature in the position. So Botvinnik plays e3, and black plays e5. This is a common theme in some of these Zamish lines for black, is that since he exchanges his dark square bishop off, he places many of his pawns on the dark squares to kind of take up for the lack of that dark square bishop. They kind of they're like the reserves coming in on the dark squares, so to speak. And then the other bishop, of course, has more scope as a result. Botvinnik again plays very strong. The center, d takes, and bishop d3 here. Of course, with this attack, discouraging castling here, so black has to take time to deal with that. But if you looked at the first game, you'll notice that Botvinnik has the same pawn structure where he has these double pawns on the c file, and they serve very well in guarding the center and also restricting the scope of black's knight. Botvinnik castles, and now f4. Again, still playing in the center and attacking his opponent's strong point in the center. And now knight d7. Um, e takes f4, e takes f4. This is just good for white as black loses his influence in the center, and now white is just totally dominant there. Black is not lost, but this definitely favors white. The idea is rook d8, but then white has this idea of f5 and then f6, and let's say for example knight c6, then just f6, and now black is already getting into hot water. To say g6, and just simply bishop takes g6. So black didn't want to take and help white out, so he played knight d7, which of course serves the purpose that if capture here, then the knight can capture, and also he can go to f6 after white's next move and prevent this idea from happening. So f5 happened and knight f6. Botvinnik played knight e4. Get rid of this defender on the queen side here. And queen d8. Knight takes, queen takes, and now the bishop came to e4, putting pressure here, discouraging, say, moves like b6, for example. And now rook to b8. Botvinnik took over the open file, possibly with ideas of doubling up on this file if he could. And now black plays b6. And now Botvinnik plays h3. A very quiet move. This is one of those long-term moves in the position. Of course, it gives some kind of shelter to the king if need be. But another possibility is g4, protecting f5 down the road. And also, in some circumstances, if white is able to work up a kingside attack, this idea of g4 and say h4, g5 is very powerful, since this move provides a hook for black, for white to use in case he does decide to storm the king side. Bishop a6, simply attacking the weak pawns. And now bishop d5. And we can see a theme common in Botvinnik's games is his dominance in the center. Here you can see the bishop on d5 is very well placed, in that although most of the white pawns are on the white squares, Botvinnik manages to get his bishop outside of the pawn chain so that his bishop is not bad. In fact, it's a dominant piece, and although black's bishop is a quote-unquote good bishop, it lacks scope. All right, so although theoretically it's good in that its own pawns aren't blocking it, the white pawns are blocking the activity of that bishop, and that Botvinnik is taking up a lot of space in the territory, and black is not really able to say the same thing. So black, understanding the problem, he starts to try to undermine the bishop here. So plays b5. Botvinnik takes, c takes, rook takes, and now just plays c4. Okay. Now rook b6, rook b1, and now Khan here played the move rook d8. Of course, there's some kind of tactics here. The rook takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, simplifying somewhat. But I like this move, rook fb8, just contesting the only open file here. And say after rook takes, the game is pretty equal here. After rook d8, this gave Botvinnik an idea to create some weakness on the queen side here, and he played rook takes b6, and black capture here with the pawn, a takes b6. Now, if he takes with the queen, it's possible, but then the queen comes under a little fire at the rook b1, and he still has to worry about this idea. So let's say he comes back, queen penetrates. Let's say king f8, e4, queen d6. We can see that black is defending, but becomes a little problematic. Let's say queen e3, probing this pawn right here. And now we can see the problem in black's position. Rook c8, and that's the lack of dominance on this open file. And rook b8 check. And again, there's the idea of f6. The queen can't really move because queen takes e5. And white is better. Going back a few moves, if after after queen e3 here, say rook d8 to try to stop the penetration to the back rank, well, then just f6. Same scenario. The queen is a little bit overworked here. And then, let's say after a move like rook c8, for example, and then just f takes g7 is brutal. So this is why Khan played a takes b6, keeping the queen in front of this pawn. But after that, e4 was played by Botvinnik, just continuing dominating in the center. Bishop c8. And notice this bishop, right, has nothing to do. This bishop is being dominated, although it's a quote-unquote good bishop. Queen a4. So now this bishop can't even return here. And now bishop d7. Now perhaps better was rook d7 because it prevents white's next move here. After bishop d7, attacking the queen just penetrates to the 7th rank. Bishop e8. Again, notice that this bishop is totally passive. I find this game interesting because of the domination of this bishop by this bishop. This centralized bishop whose pawns are all light squares, but this bishop is outside of the pawn chain in an attacking situation and in the center of the board. This bishop is a good bishop, right, in theory, but is being totally dominated due to the space advantage of white here. Game continue. Rook b1, again, just penetration on the queen side. And notice how Botvinnik is attacking the weakest point in the position. Rook d6. And now a4. And the idea is to continue to attack this weak point in the position, right? Old school chess right here. Attack where your opponent is at his weakest and where you're strong. So king h7, a5, b takes, queen takes. So the pawn has been traded off, but now we have a new weakness, and this time it can't be defended. So rook a6, queen takes c5, and quickly the black position falls apart. Queen e3. This is to stop this idea of queen g5. Queen a6. And all black can do at this point is just try to swindle, right, and get a mate or something like that. He's busted here. Rook b8, queen a5, a4, protecting the bishop here. King just ducks into safety, avoiding checks. Rook h3, queen c5, and basically all white has to do is just consolidate, make sure there's no cheap moves available. And after rook a2, just nice chess by Botvinnik, making sure everything's off the board. This bishop is attacked, so this queen really can't move too many places. So he just decides to capture. So for example, if queen c2 here, threatening mate, right? So this is why you can't just take this bishop. Just simply rook takes, queen takes, and then queen e7, attacking the bishop here. This pawn here twice, and the pawn on e5. So again, the black position is in shambles, right? And after say a move like queen a4 protecting this, there's too many moves to choose from. This bishop takes here, c5, take your pick. So this is why Khan decided to give it the queen and play bishop, queen takes a8. But of course, he's totally lost here. Pawn drops, bishop c6, queen c7, attacking the bishop, and Khan resigned here. So that's the end of that game. Just real simple, logical, straightforward chess by Botvinnik. Nothing spectacular. He just basically played in the center, utilizing the double pawns on the c pawn again. His opponent had a small weakness in the position on b6, and he just simply just build up against that. And once that collapsed, then the rest of the position collapsed shortly after. So that's a number two. We're going to keep going. I'm going to add this video to the playlist of Botvinnik in his prime. Hope you enjoyed that. Please hit the buttons below and check the links below also in the description box. And I look forward to your comments and feedback on Botvinnik in his games. And we'll see you on the next video.